Hola, hola, aquí. Buenas tardes a...
Hello to everyone, to all of you, and welcome. We're lucky enough to have one of the most important programmers in everything that has to do with new technologies, etc. She has been working since 1998 for the Sundance Festival. She has been the senior programmer in cinema. And now she's the chief curator of an experimental program called New Frontiers. She's going to explain what is this about. And therefore, we are going to give Shari Frilot a very warm welcome. Thank you very much. Well, we give her the floor, but after her presentation, we're going to have a round of questions, and taking advantage of having the best, one of the best experts in her field. Do not be shy and take advantage of having her here. This conference is within the framework of this Women-Made Cinema Festival. And I encourage you to see the virtual reality exhibition on the 4th floor of this building. And I encourage you to go and see the films that we have programmed in this festival, or for this festival. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me here at this amazing festival. And thank you for the translation. We'll be swapping words back and forth through this device. So let's see here. Prepare to talk for you. It has a lot in it, so I'm going to read a lot, but I'll show you a lot as well. So as Elena explained, I'm the senior programmer at Sundance for the films. That's my first job. The second job is a program called New Frontier, which is what I'm here to talk to you about. New Frontier is an experimentation in festival programming. It was designed to follow innovation in storytelling as we found it at the crossroads of film, art, and technology. And why do this at Sundance? We had an incredibly successful film festival. Why do this big experiment? Why invest? The reason why is because we're a discovery festival, and we follow the artists, and this is where the artists were taking us. You know, the art world started to yield filmmakers that were ready for their close-up, like Miranda July, Isaac Julian, John Mabry, Matthew Barney. So these are films that were coming to our festival doing very well, coming straight from the art world. At the same time, and I'm talking about 2003, 4, 5, 6, there was an emerging digital technologies that were becoming very important to our filmmakers. Digital cinematography, and a little thing called YouTube started to creep up into the public space, and we found that our filmmakers were making things for YouTube, showing on YouTube, so we had to follow that. Then there were also filmmakers that were creating stories on CD-ROM, like Carol Parrott Blue, her beautiful piece called Before Dawn. And I personally, you know, as Elena mentioned, I was there since 1998, showing films, having a great time showing films, but starting to feel like maybe there was nowhere else to go within the organization, kind of locked into a structure. And I realized after a while that I would have to do something on my own, or as my favorite science fiction author, Octavia Butler, says, I need to write myself into the action. So in 2006, I convinced the powers that be to give us a dusty a venue that was run by sponsorship called the Digital Center, and recreated it as New Frontier. And that's what you're seeing here on the screen. The idea, that's a picture of New Frontier 2008. So the idea was to bring these three practices, film, art, and technology, together in the interest of exploring the expanse and innovation in storytelling. We would build a showcase that was social in nature. The idea was not to do a black box from cinematic traditions or a white box in art. We wanted to create a lounge, something that was social in nature. And so this lounge has purple walls. It has nothing to do with film or art. It actually has to do more with club culture. And we would want to, we put, you can't see it there, but we put couches and ottomans. The idea was to create a venue that had no natural light at all. Park City is a beautiful ski town with lots of sun, mountains. This venue would be completely controlled with the light. And our approach was to put the light where you would find either artwork or each other to be able to talk. The idea, the philosophy behind this is to build a venue to create avenues to the audiences through their bodies, not necessarily through their minds or eyes. We wanted to approach them to their bodies. So this is a venue that really was comfortably meant to wrap around the audience's bodies. We wanted to break down the audiences. We wanted to make them feel comfortable and sexy, make them feel okay with not knowing what this crazy thing was. Because there was a lot of experimental work in there, things that they hadn't seen before. They didn't know why. There was art at Sundance for a long time. It was called that. But inside, feeling comfortable, I wanted them to feel comfortable with not knowing and with creating a new kind of language to talk about this new kind of storytelling. I want them to feel like they can approach somebody that they didn't know, like you would be at a bar. So our aim was, ultimate aim with this project was to provoke innovation in form and practice and independence in artistic expression. So we christened New Frontier in 2007, and there were two key women. I'm really going to tell you the story, the history of New Frontier through the lens of the women that were there, since I'm here at Cine por Mujeres. That seems like very appropriate, and you'll see that it's actually quite a remarkable story, because it is the women in the end that is being buoyed by this program hand in hand. So the very first edition, we featured a Moby opera by Shuli Chang. It was a crowdsourced soap opera shot on mobile phones that was edited and uploaded into a timeline that told the story of the festival through the participants' eyes. The story world ended up in a big party at the end of the festival. And Shuli, you should watch out for her in Venice. She actually was chosen to occupy the Taiwanese pavilion in Venice this year. Lynn Hirschman-Leeson was also there with her documentary Strange Culture. It featured Tilda Swinton. There she is there with Karen Black, interestingly. So this was a documentary that was about a bioscientist going to jail for ordering biocultures online. So we showed the film, and we also showed the film in Second Life. I don't know how many people know what Second Life is, but it is an online community that you can join. We built a theater inside of Second Life, showed the film, and did a Q&A inside of Second Life. So it was sort of a bio-digital Q&A that DJ Spooky chaired, moderated. In 2008, the fine artists were starting to, in the art world, were starting to learn about the festival, and they were starting to come. And so we started to show the work. What you see here is Jennifer Steinkamp's Mike Kelly trees. They were in the first shot that I showed you of the New Frontier Lounge. And Marina Zerkow is a digital artist who makes generative works. They're digital works that are never the same. It's generating from some kinds of sources of data, various sources of data. And so this was similarly situated in a lounge. We also that year featured Stephanie Rothberg and Jeffrey Krause's Invisible Threads. So in this piece, this was also in Second Life. They had built a sweatshop in Second Life where people not in Park City were in there creating jeans to order. So the idea was that the shop was at New Frontier. You would come in, we would take your measurements, send it to the sweatshop in Second Life. They would manufacture these jeans, send it back to New Frontier, and they would be printed on these giant HP printers. Then there would be people there sewing them up, and these what they look like. The jeans there, they're wearing them. So this was like very interesting ways of like stretching how you tell a story. Before we didn't have stories that you could wear, and now this new technology was enabling us to really change and grow the anatomy of storytelling. In 2009, there was a I met a remarkable artist from Australia named Lynette Walworth, and she brought a haptic tech to the storytelling process. Haptic meaning things that you touch. You have to touch to be able to move the story along. And this piece, Evolution of Fearlessness, was really remarkable. I just watched it slay people. It happens in a dark room. You go in and you see a pulsing light at the end of the room. And then you sat down at a table to read stories, short stories about women who survived war-torn situations. And then the light would beckon you. You would go to the light, and you put your hand on the light. And when you did, the light disappeared, and a woman, one of the women that you had just read about, would emerge from the darkness and put her hand next to yours. And you felt that, and you felt it something much larger than touching a screen. You felt you were touching a story, a woman, an experience, and it was really remarkable. In 2010, this space, New Frontier, this crossroads, this was after a big economic crash in the States, and a lot of the studios, independent studios, were falling out. People were looking for answers, how to rebuild. And people now started to come to New Frontier not as just a point of question, of curiosity, but actually looking for answers. And there were a number of new business models that were coming out of New Frontier that people were taking note of. One was a renowned artist, a Swiss artist named Peppelotti Rist. She made a feature, we premiered a feature called Pepperminta, but she conceived the feature as a multi-platform storyscape. So in the Egyptian theater, you could see her feature Pepperminta. Across the street at New Frontier, you could walk into the story world of this piece in her fully immersive installation called Lobe of the Lung, the saliva ooze away to the underground that you see there. In 2011, we retook the stage again, Egyptian, and gave it to this amazing, she's an animator, but she's also a performance artist, and she incorporates her shadows inside of her own animations. I had a clip for you, but maybe at some point afterwards I could try to show it to you. But her work is absolutely remarkable, and her name is Miwa Maitrek. That year we also showed a couple of transmedia works. 2011 was like a transmedia. I don't know how many people are familiar with that term, but that's something that was very much in fashion and attempting to describe a way of telling stories that were off the screen and that followed the body or treated the environment of the medium that was way beyond like a source play, a playback. And so Lynn Hirschman-Leeson came back and presented Women Art Revolution and Raw War. This is, again, a feature film with a transmedia component. It was a crowdsourced archive. What she noticed was that it was just really hard to find any kind of information on women who were practicing in the art world. So she set up a website so that anybody could upload women in practice or women's artwork onto the site. So that you can see, so we would make our own archive, we would make our own history, and provide our own access to our history. And the Bear 71 was actually a seminal moment in transmedia storytelling. Jeremy Mendes and Leanne Allison made this work. It let humans interact with wildlife using network satellites and digital surveillance. The audiences used smartphones in front of a large screen, and they followed a grizzly bear tagged by Canadian Rangers in a very actually emotionally moving story about the bear. 2011 was also the year that I paid a visit to a journalist, a woman journalist. Her name was Nani de la Peña, and she was doing some interesting things in Second Life. She was creating documentaries in Second Life. There was a piece called Guantanamo Bay, about Guantanamo Bay called Gone Gitmo, where she reconstructed Guantanamo Bay in Second Life so that she could walk around and actually be inside of that prison. So she called me and said, "Shari, you gotta come to my studio. I want to show you something." I said, "Okay, well, let's go." And she strapped me into something that looked like this. This was a military-grade VR headset. She's a very accomplished journalist, and USC had a program for women who were interested in upgrading or augmenting or expanding their practice within their field. So she was a journalist, and she wanted to figure out, she was very frustrated about writing stories about hunger, about homelessness, and no one was really, wasn't having the impact that she wanted. So she wanted to find a more immersive way of telling her stories. And so she turned to VR. And this was the first piece that she made. It was called Hunger in Los Angeles. Let me go back. So what you were seeing inside of that headset was a world that looked like this. But it was completely surrounded. It's 360. You go inside with the headset, and you were online, a hunger line. This guy was online to get some food, and he started to tremble, and he fell out from a diabetic coma, fell onto the ground, and the person online, the one that was monitoring the line, was yelling to tell you to get back, and the ambulance came and picked him up. So that was the story. Now imagine reading that story. And like, okay, well, that happened, that happens every day. Or even watching it on TV, you would see it, but you wouldn't feel it. Being there, you also drop to your knees and you try to help the guy. You start to feel, you go home that night and you dream about it as if it's something happened to you. It becomes a memory. And that's what happened to me that night, and I realized, wow, this is remarkable. This is absolutely amazing. I had a long conversation with Nani that I could maybe talk about another time, but the crux of it was that she's a journalist, and her mission as a journalist is to educate the voting public, but this took a long time to get in and out, and she was like, I don't know, Shari, it's a good question, but I'm absolutely sure that this is what I want to do, and her passion with the experience that I had in that headset, led me to invite it to the festival. So I invited it for the 2012 festival. They showed up. This is the headset that I saw it in, very sexy. They showed up with something that looked like this. I was like, wait a minute, what is that? I got very nervous. She's like, no, don't worry, Shari, it works, it works. So that headset before was USC's military-grade headset. It's about $50,000. She said, I'm invited to Sundance. They're like, you are not taking our $50,000 headset to Sundance. So her and her 17-year-old intern, Palmer Luckey at the time, they developed this prototype, which essentially is the prototype for the Oculus Rift. After we played this, Palmer, who was very obsessed with creating a consumer version, took the press that came out on the Oculus Rift at the festival, did a Kickstarter for $250,000 to fund development of a prototype, and ended up raising $2.5 million, and it immediately went into production. Meanwhile, so that was 2012. In 2013, Lynette came back with the first augmented reality piece that we showed at the festival. This is a dome film project to commemorate the first time. It's called Coral, Rekindling Venus, and it was made to commemorate the first time the international science community collaborated with each other to witness the transit of Venus in the 1700s. So in this piece, instead, the subject would be the endangered coral reef, and the film would show in 25 planetariums around the world at the same time. And it featured this AR component, the coral on the right-hand side. If you download the app on your phone and pointed it at that coral, it comes alive. It becomes a virtual portal to the coral hotspots, and it was connected to live data streaming from those hotspots, and it connected you. It was really remarkable work. So in 2014, Palmer finished it. He had the DK1. Here's the Oculus Rift, and I said, yes, we're on, let's do it. Where's the work? And they had a couple of apps. It was really crazy, a great app that was a cinema, so we showed some 3D films inside of the app. But then I also paired a couple of artists who had work that were also tracking this technology. One named Chris Milk. He had shot a 360 music video of Beck called Sound of Vision that he retrofitted it into the Oculus Rift. There was also a really great digital, it was a documentary about the data culture, and they created a chapter on the DK1, and that's what we showed in 2014. It turns out that Mark Zuckerberg's sister was at the festival that year, and about 3 months later, the Oculus Rift sold to Facebook for $2 billion. And my life changed. all have changed. There's that was the beginning of a sea change in cinematic storytelling, because this medium was really exciting filmmakers. It was blowing people away. They had never experienced being inside of a film in this way. And if you haven't experienced VR yourself, I would encourage you to do so. There's a lineup here, I think in this building, in the festival, a number of works, in fact, that we showed at New Frontier, and one that won Venice last year as well. So 3 months later, bought it. The New Frontier became an initiative of the Institute. I got a big old promotion, upgraded my experiment to an initiative at the Institute, and something that we're all really, really excited about. 2015, the next year, was indeed a watershed year, not only for this medium, for the festival, for the program. It featured Nani's work, Project Syria. It was about 15 works, most of which were VR. We made that decision because we felt we understood the importance of this medium. So she showed a work, this Project Syria, which it put audiences in the shoes of a child playing in the crosswalk in Syria just before it was bombed. And then I convinced my friend Rose Trochet, who had shown many films at the festival, to lean into VR. I was like, I've got a new hobby for you, Rose. It's VR. Check it out. And so she leaned into it, and she created this groundbreaking VR work called Perspective, the Party, which put audiences in the shoes of both a man and then again as the woman involved in an incident of date rape. And this completely blew open how we do not have language to talk about this kind of thing. And it triggered audiences, it provoked audiences, and it was a memorable work all around. So they were Nani and Rose. They were part of the first major VR lineup in the history of film festivals, and that's what this was. The show drew an overwhelming response from filmmakers. So the first thing that we did with our initiative was to start a jaunt residency, a residency with a company. VR company, to place an artist inside the company so that they can figure out how to make a VR. And we selected Lynette Walworth because of her stellar career and achievement and her vision to be the first to participate. So we knew there was this sea change happening, and I think this is a good time to talk about the women at Sundance. Who was behind this? Kamal Sinclair she's my partner in crime. She's the director of the New Frontier Story Lab and residencies, and kind of built this initiative together. Jessie Cohen was the first publicist at Sundance who really had her head wrapped around what this was and knew how to talk about it, not only to the film outlets that we always talk to, but also to the tech outlets and experimental art magazines. Jennifer Arsenault was the woman she ran media and development, and she understood this like the back of her hand because she came from the art world, and she created a campaign around New Frontier's 10th anniversary, which was coming up in 2016. And that allowed us to play in a very large platform and also move parts of the show to the Museum of Modern Art in New York and the Walker Museum. And Yelena Rachitsky was actually, she worked for me. She was my intern, and then she became an employee of the labs, and now she's the one that's actually running the story studio part of Oculus at Facebook. So, of course, Carrie Putnam is our fearless leader. She's right in the middle there with Robert Redford and John Cooper. She's the woman that really supported all of this and hired some of us and supported us doing something that nothing like this had ever been done really at the Institute. So what happened to that jaunt residency? Well, collisions happened. Lynette made this really amazing VR about an Aboriginal man and his first contact with the West, and it happened to be witnessing a nuclear explosion and what that felt like and what that was. She She went on to show this work at the World Economic Forum, where it actually changed policy around testing, nuclear testing. And it was also the first VR to show in a group setting, so it's like 100 people watched it at the same time. And it also won an Emmy, and so it was a really remarkable ride. So in 2017, 16, yes, 16, here we are, the 10th anniversary. The tech was changing so fast. Already there was a DK2, a development kit 2. It was so much better. And also the technology had upgraded to something that you could put on your head instead of like sitting in one place and looking around you. Now you can walk around in the environments. And that's what was happening in 2016. And it blew people's minds. I mean, this technology was moving so fast, and it was getting much better. VR essentially took center stage at the 2016 festival. The profile of the section radically increased, and it drew about 30,000 people to the exhibition. So that year, that very year, 2016, look at all of the women in this show. It's almost 50%. I'm just going to keep cooking. All of these women in the show. It was very interesting to see this medium draw the interest and the practice of women artists, filmmakers, journalists. They all came out, and they all embraced this. And this technology, especially at this time, was not easy to deal with, but they all leaned in, and they were making some phenomenal work, really phenomenal work. I don't think I have time to talk much about, yes, but I can always come back and talk to you about some of these works. I'm just going to try to whip through the history so that you can get a larger sense, and then we can have some Q&A. But one piece in particular that year that is definitely worth pointing out is this piece called Real Virtuality, Immersive Explorers. This piece was created by Cecilia Charbonnier and Sylvain Cheig, probably ruining their names, but they're Swiss artists, actually a technologist. Cecilia was a professional tennis player and got her PhD in sports medicine and anatomy. And so she created, with Sylvain, custom tech that that let audiences explore environments together and interact with each other inside the digital space. And they did it with incredible fidelity. Even now, with all of the technology that's out there, that allows you to meet people inside of the digital space, theirs is the best, still. It's kind of amazing. And in fact, it was not wasted on who was at the time an executive at DreamWorks. He left and went into business with them and started a company called Dreamscape. And Dreamscape is now all over the US in Westfield malls with a whole slate of works using this technology to bring 4, 5, 6, 7 people at a time to have experiences and interact with each other inside these virtual environments. Now, was this a blip, or what was going to happen here in terms of women coming to this medium? It turns out it kept happening. In 2017, 11 of the 26 artists were made by women. Of the work were women. It was amazing. And they were doing it and coming from different backgrounds. This piece called Neuro-Speculative Afrofeminism were architects that came and created a beauty salon. Some of them had featuring products that were from the future, and also a salon that was a VR salon. And you sat into it, and you can get these trans neuro extensions. It was like a hair salon, but it was all in VR. The piece called Tree by Melissa Zeck and Winslow Porter was a very popular piece. It's been traveling around a lot. It essentially lets you become a tree in the forest. Your body becomes a tree, and you go through the history of the forest as it as animals live there, as people come to join, and as it becomes developed and as it becomes destroyed. And you feel not only you feel the wind, you feel the heat of the fires, You feel the jackhammers. They created a haptic environment around you so that you can actually feel what you saw. It was absolutely remarkable and kind of a breakthrough. Now, another piece I think that's worth mentioning is 0 Days. Alex Gibney made a documentary about malware and cyber warfare. Yasmin from Scatter, she made this piece, a VR piece, which essentially let you become a piece of malware. You become a computer virus. Now that's completely this is what's amazing about VR, is that it lets you do things that are physically impossible, but once in the hands of a talented filmmaker, you can embody the feeling, the motion, the dynamism of what it means to be a computer virus. In this piece, it won an Emmy as well for that effort. So in 2018, again, 12 out of the 25 artists were women. These are lead artists. VR, very difficult, hard to make. It's collaborative, very much like filmmaking. But the lead artists are kind of what you would equivocate as the director. So these are 11 of the 25 or the 26 artists. The lead artists were women in this year. And this is the year that we featured. One of them was Spheres. This is a 3-part series that's actually being featured here at the festival. It's on the Oculus Rift. It was made by Eliza McNitt. And this is an absolutely remarkable piece. It won Venice, and it made history, actually, when we world premiered this at Sundance. It was the first VR ever to sell for 7 figures out of the festival. So this really invigorated the community of VR and new tech. It was a very kind of an interesting deal that was made. It had to do, it restructured the way that we think about acquisitions. In general, how we think about it in film. This had more to do with production as well as outlets. But it was a very important thing that happened. So this past January, the 2019 edition of New Frontier, we showed 27 artists and 17 were women. So this is happening. This is on. This New Frontier is being made by women, and it's really remarkable. What you're finding is, it's parity. There's a community of men and women creating these brand new ways of storytelling, working together in ways that we just haven't seen, not in the art world nor in the film world. But we're seeing it in this powerful new movement that's coming up. And the technology continues to grow. There's all these works. All these works were lead artists by women. But this is the new technology that we premiered this year at New Frontier. Magic Leap is a company. If you follow this field, you have heard about Magic Leap, and you've been hearing about it, and you're waiting for it to come out. This is a $4 billion startup that took 4 years to unveil. We were the first festival to show storytelling works after their own conference. And 2 of the 3 works that were made for the Magic Leap featured lead women artists. One was an in-house project. It's actually what we show is not only works of fiction and storytelling experience, but we also sometimes show technology, pure technology, or bring in a media lab. And so I brought in for this, from Magic Leap, their digital human AI. And she was called Micah. She was being developed by John Manos and Alice Moreau. And it was a woman, a digital, so you put on the headset and you see Micah. And she doesn't talk yet. In fact, it's one of the things that I talk to Magic Leap a lot with, because I actually think that one of the more powerful things about her is that she doesn't communicate with you through language. She communicates with you gesturally. She gets you to do things by looking at you, responding to you. She looks human. She responds to you in facial expression like a human, and she gets you to do things. Really remarkable. And another piece that was created by Robert Gilbert and Jessica Curry, was kind of led by Sarah Ellis at the Royal Shakespeare Company, called The 7 Ages of Man, which is essentially a production of The 7 Ages of Man, a seminal speech in As You Like It for the Magic Leap, and they came within our venue, created an amphitheater inside the venue where The 7 Ages of Man was performed by Robert Gilbert. And there's something very special about seeing a performance just for you, but you're also seeing everything else around you in the world. I can't explain it, but you have to. I encourage you to, if you have the opportunity to put on Magic Leap and experience something like this, to do it, because there's a fullness, a feeling of fullness something that is specially for you, but it doesn't take you out from the world. So this is a different kind of technology. It's not better or worse than virtual, because the virtual reality, it's just the digital world that the author puts you in. Here, you're in your own world, but you also see this whale jumping out of this table and down off the stage. And it's just for you. But it won't be for long, because Magic Leap is it's not only a technology that's designed to give you experiences, it is a technology to replace, where's my phone? To replace this. It is a computing technology. And so essentially you put this in your pocket, you wear the leap, and they are going to develop this so that we can, instead of texting, we can actually look at each other and do things visually and be connected and compute and actually see the unseen through the data stream, which is an incredibly powerful capacity. So what's next? 2020? I don't know. But I never know. You know, every time I think that something is going to take 10 years, it happens the next year. You know, AI is a technology that is being embraced. It's all around us, but it's also being embraced more and more intelligently by the artists and storytellers. I expect to see a lot more of that. A lot more works on Magic Leap. I'm tracking some drone projects that are really super interesting. Things that are that cover the ground. Maybe engaging with the metropolis, something that's beyond Park City. We don't know, but hopefully you'll stay tuned to find out. Thank you very much.
Todos impresionadísimos.
I think everyone is very impressed. Thank you so much, Shari. Now we have our time for our Q&A, but the first thing that I want to say is that I was very surprised by the speed of everything. Everything goes so fast. That's one thing. On the other hand, since it's a new technology and it's a new way of experimenting from the beginning, we see that there's a great number of women involved in these projects, maybe because there is no luggage that we're already carrying in a world where women were not already involved. What's your opinion on this? What's your take on this?
It's a very smart observation that you just made. I think it resonates with my, interest in doing this to begin with. I think a lot of women find themselves in a very organic place of looking for a pivot in their life. However successful, there is I think women are very open to opportunities to fully develop themselves that may not exist in the world. So when you have something brand new, it's very exciting, it's very powerful. I think it draws not only women, it drew a lot of people of color. New Frontier is the most diverse section of the festival throughout the history of the festival. And I think that has a lot to do with the opportunities that exist in a powerful field that's yet unstructured. And women have really stepped to. It's amazing how fast it's growing, and I think it's very important that women get involved with these technologies because the rapid pace of how these technologies are developing are not only affecting how we tell stories, but it also affects how we live our life. It's our environment. We live in a fully immersive installation. I mean, and New Frontier was designed to resonate with that, with our new life, our modern life of always being immersed in media. And as AI develops, and as men write algorithms for the AI, the concerns for women, the concerns for people that are not in power, they fall behind if the algorithms are not there valuing these populations and these cultures of ways of thinking, the approaches to life, approaches to storytelling, and also to manufacturing, to everything. So it's the parity. There's such a beauty in parity and diversity. Our strength is in diversity. As much as you want to read Darwin as it goes to the fittest. Actually, that's a misreading of Darwin. It's the diversity that actually makes us strong. So it's really energizing to see women moving into this rapidly emerging field of technology, and how powerful the effects will be, not only on the screen or in festivals, but in the world.
Okay, pues
Well, I think that gives us...
os animo a que preguntéis a Shari.
I encourage you to, well, that gives us hope for the future. I encourage you to ask Shari, now or never.
And for telling us all this. I suppose you are understanding me. And I have a question about this. I've been watching these pieces for the last few years, a few pieces, not as many as you, of course, but I would like to comment I would like you to comment on this idea I have, that on talking about virtual reality, there is a lot put on the word virtual. And what's going on with the word reality? I mean, when watching many pieces I've seen, I remember the strongest emotion watching a lion lying there and suddenly standing up and coming to me. And that was the strong thing I've seen in virtual reality. So I would like you to comment on that.
Yeah, that's such a great question. Early on in exploring this as a curator, I felt the need to talk to neuroscientists just to understand, what is this? What is it? How is this medium engaging our brains? And found that so reality, the only thing that's real, if you look at it in a physics sense, is the light in the room. That's the only thing that we actually see. We see light. You see light bouncing off of me. You see light bouncing off of this table. And it's only your brain that tells you, oh, that's Shari, or that's the table. But really, all you see is light. And so the brain has ways of creating the story of reality, right? And that has been evolving over the course of the millennia. But our old brain, the reptilian brain, the brain that is the fight or flight brain, that is something that can be touched or engaged in cinema or in literature, but it is the direct engagement of the fight or flight brain that VR brings. And so it's all real, right? Like, film engages with your biochemistry. That's real. That's those emotions. But film rarely makes you want to run away. But VR often makes you want to run, like move, or people still love watching other people in VR do silly things, because what they're doing is like, dodging the bullet or the train or trying to touch something soft. And that's the reptilian brain being engaged by VR. And so it allows, this medium allows us to have a conversation about reality with around a piece of brain that we don't really talk so much about unless we're talking about war, But this is like for storytelling. And it's the conversation has just begun. So this question about, reality, what is real, what is not. It's such a great time to ask this question, especially now that our biosphere is kind of falling apart. We're having a hard time keeping our air clean and our water clean. Those are real, but we're taught we act in ways that are not real. So what is the disconnect? How do we explore this? Perhaps it's interesting to explore it through mediums that also question reality and our position in our environment.
I'm amazed now by the question and the answer. I have to say, just let me finish with it. I have to say that I was watching, one of the first films that was taken to a little village in Spain. I'm talking about the 20s or something like that. And in the film, there were cars, and obviously these people from this village, they've never seen a car. And it was like a flat screen, screen, of course, black and white, not even sound. It was a silent film. And the reaction of the audience watching the cars was exactly the same reaction that you were talking about virtual reality, because they will see the car and they will move, or they will see our dog and they will laugh and they will try to, go and pet the dog. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's a kind of rewiring, because 3D, remember when 3D came out and people were like, ah! And people still get the thrill, but they don't fear for their life anymore because we are actively being rewired in tandem with these technologies. It allows us to think about things in different ways.
Yeah, I'm going to use that word. Get rewired.
Get rewired. Hi.
First of all, thank you for this. This was amazing. I'm having a lot of feelings because I'm doing a PhD in actually immersive narratives.
Oh, fantastic.
So, my first question is obviously, can I please work with you, for you, at any given moment, because this what you were talking about is so cool. And what I'm really into, and I was really wondering, maybe you could have an answer for it, is I see that virtual reality throughout its time, it's been developing a lot, technologically speaking, but the way we tell stories or the rhythm within the stories, have you seen any development in how they're writing the stories for VR now that, it keeps changing all the time? Is it longer now? Because at the beginning, there's like, people get dizzy and they get uncomfortable, so they don't like long experiences. So do you feel like we're getting to that point where we're actually going to be able not only to express an emotion, but actually tell a long story, like in a movie, which is like 2 hours or something like that? We'll be there soon, or will it take like a lot longer?
Well, this technology, as you've seen, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, it's 7 years old. It's a baby. Think about it as like a 7-year-old baby. Like it really is. It's being developed, even though the technology is muscularly developing. Things are looking better. The latency, it doesn't make you sick anymore. You can walk around. These kinds of the abilities and the capabilities of the technology will continue to grow by leaps and bounds. How the storytellers take it on, it depends on who they are. And one of the problematic things that's happening in VR that I see is that there is it's so seductive to bring movie making to VR making, because movie making is a very mature, very lucrative, very powerful, and very successful medium. And of course you want VR to be that, but VR is a totally different thing. So what I am starting to find over the course of, as this thing is rolling out, are people trying to figure out how to do the things that you can do in movies, how to make a cut, how to make a dissolve, but in the end, it's the works that leave that whole thing behind and invent new kinds of languages. And to a certain extent, Spheres is an example of that. A piece called Waves, like musicians will come at this in a really different way. Performance artists are really, the piece called Wolves in the Wall. There's a trend now of VR developers working with immersive theater troupes to figure out how to create the story, because it's very much like being inside of a theatrical play. And then creating also AI characters inside of that. That is to say, You know, if there was a little girl here and she offers me a Polaroid camera and I don't do it, she'll do one thing. If I take it, she'll do another thing. So these kind of branching characters are something that, you know, with the AI technology, I'm watching improve in like really remarkable ways. You know, the question of how there are, I mean, it so happens that some of these works are becoming longer. I think that reflects more an impulse to explore story worlds and explore the technology more than I think it is anymore of artists trying to create the next kind of feature film kind of thing. But you know, it's so hard to say because you know, hopefully you got it from this history that VR is the beginning of a suite of technologies that are coming to the fore that are different but also work together. And where this is going to end up, where it's going to end us, I don't really know. But I do know that it is very disruptive. It disrupts the things that we think we know. It disrupts our sense of reality. And I think that's important. That's an important thing to happen right now.
It's been a long way since the, you know, the paintings with the hands in prehistorical, you know, prehistory to virtual reality. So it's like we don't need to put our hands or to design a buffalo anymore because, you know, we've gone through a lot of other, you know, painting and sketching and then photography and then cinema. So maybe we will not need cinema anymore. Or
the hands mean something else. You know, just like the evolution of Fearlessness, she put her hand on the screen, but it wasn't just to feel her hand or to see it, but that her hand became a medium to another person's experience. And so it's like, so what is the body anymore? You know, these technologies help us explore what makes us us that might be beyond what we think we are. You know, just the hand. Maybe there's something that's, you know, another lens could show the energy that's coming out of my hands and that connects to everybody and see the water in the room. And because it's all a system. It's all, you know, physics. It's the light in the room that we're seeing, but what's bouncing off is the story that can be retold.
¿Algún otro valiente o alguna otra valiente?
Any other daring person would dare to ask? Any questions? You're too shy, I think. Well, as Shari understands Spanish rather well, I do it in English.
What I have to say is that in my personal experience, when I was watching the other day Spheres, the piece by Eliza McNeat, I was watching it with first, and then someone else came to watch it. When it ended, we both said, we are not scared of dying anymore. You know, because we have become a particle in the Big Bang explosion. We have become a little piece of dust in the universe. So it completely blew my mind because actually, you know, I felt like, wow, you know, we don't have to be so self-centered anymore. And there is more to life than, you know, what we think. And
that's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting because I realized, like, the last couple of years, I've had a shift in my attitude around death, that I don't feel as afraid as I used to.
You see, we've never talked about this before. I mean,
let's open up our lives.
Yes,
but there's I never thought about it as having any connection, you know, with the work that I do. But there is something about what you say that I think has something to do with that. you know, maybe because death is just like a state of transcendence, it's the only way that you can reach for it, right? And this medium gives you that in various ways. So maybe I think my brain thinks that it knows something more about it. But it is nice to not have the fear that I used to have.
Yeah, I feel good.
I respect it. I respect death. but the fear is lessened. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, we go from technology to transcendence. So, talking about narratives, you know, speaking of narratives. So, someone else wants to ask questions. Shari was telling me before that she feels like the Spanish people never wants to ask questions, that we are very shy. I guess we are.
You speak Spanish, maybe.
¿Queréis hacer alguna pregunta? Shari me estaba diciendo antes, es que...
Well, she's repeating exactly the same. Shari was giving a lecture yesterday and she was telling me that Spaniards are very shy, normally, and they don't like to ask. Well, it's okay. I mean, it's the way we are. Nothing wrong with it. You don't have to perform what you are not. Okay, I see a hand raised. Go ahead, shoot.
Right, author Octavia Butler.
Yes.
Right, and you said that she said that I need to write myself in the stories and all that. So do you think that I guess the answer is yes because of what you've been saying today, but maybe the main importance of VR is not only the fact that we get to explore technology or even narratives, but the fact or the effect that those narratives are going to have on ourselves. For example, being able to inhabit or embody a completely different reality and be able to own a completely different point of view. So like sectors of humankind that are underrepresented in VR, you get help in order to understand what is their reality. So like there's this VR experiences where you see like the date rape, or there was another one made for families that wanted to explore violence in homes, and how a woman feels when a man is hitting you, and men were like completely unable to understand why you would feel threatened by a man that is like bigger and stuff like that. So when they put up the VR set and they saw a taller person being like aggressive towards them, they suddenly realized what it was to feel so vulnerable. So it's like the exploration of vulnerability throughout basically being forced into that vulnerability. Because I believe that privileged people, you're never really aware of how privileged you are, and VR kind of like takes that away and strips you from your comfort zone. And I feel like maybe what you're doing and the New Frontiers kind of like gives option and gives voice to all those people that are presenting those realities and forcing those points of view. So do you think there's like it should be easier to get access to VR because it's like a social thing, it's like a social service in order to make communities better? So maybe in schools, like, do you think it would be like interesting and important to make it more easy to access for younger people or for everyone else, like right here, like, or maybe in university?
Well, there are a couple of things. One, you'll want to know that there is a lab here in Spain, in Barcelona, called the Be Another Lab. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but they are they're neuroscientists working with this medium, and they construct experiences that let you be another person. And some of it is a little clunky when it doesn't work. When it works, it's amazing how you could actually feel like you're in somebody else's body. And they do this, and they're doing something now, their new project around the immigration experience, how they use their technique so that you are watching a VR about any kind of immigrant, different immigrants that are telling their stories, and you, through syncing your motion with their motion in the VR, you start to feel their hands as your hands. And as they're telling the story, it allows the story to enter deeply. It's very interesting work that they're doing. But the other thing that I want to say is that, so that definitely opens up like insights into someone else's experience. But are you really becoming that person? I actually think that you're not. I actually think what's happening is that you get this chance to watch yourself watch yourself make choices with your body in this situation. And it's like it's a little bit of a safe space, you know, like, because outside of the VR, when you're, you know, in a situation where somebody's coming at you, your reptile brain is like, fight him or run. You don't really sit there and watch yourself doing it. You just do it. But inside, you know that you don't have to run, even though you're wanting to run. So you have that moment inside the headset that you're watching yourself make choices. And I think that is what's important to pay attention to. Because that's something that we've not really had before, how we can observe ourselves in those fight or flight situations. And to think about or use those observations to understand our values and then make choices, you know, make different choices. Yes. Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
So they're like a lot of experimenting on like the fear of flight. So they make you like feel like you're in the plane, and that supposedly cures you or whatever. But there are a lot of theories that say that no, you never change. You are who you are always. You're just playing out in a scenario, and that kind of fulfills your fantasy of becoming that hero type, or like I did the right thing in the simulator, and then you go back into life and you're the same shitty person that you were before the experience. So I feel like I don't know how stories are going to be able to shape us, because I do think that a story, if you feel it and you make it your own, it has the ability to change you. But I don't know if that is the case with virtual reality. And it's mesmerizing for me because it's the one story that you get to physically act out. So you should be able to feel more immersed emotionally. But then when it's over, and then you go home. So I don't know. Do you think it's like a lingering effect, like a virtual reality experience that has a lingering effect, or do you think that it's like watching a movie and then when the end comes, you just go home and do your own thing?
Well, you know, I mean, for me, I think it's like kind of like the movie. If it was like a bad movie, I kind of forgot about it. But if it's like this amazing movie, it changes my life. You know, like it really, VR is a little bit that way. But the storytelling, the craft of the storytelling is still being developed, and it's more of an experimental phase. So it's really more moments that I hold on to rather than entire works at this juncture. Yeah, I think there's that, and then there's also another thing to consider. You know, this is not the new TV. This is actually, so if you look at, another way to put it, if you look at the pie of the economy of VR, like who is developing it, you'll find that 25% of it is the medical industry. And they're using it in ways to treat patients from PTSD, because using it allows the person who has PTSD to actually confront the trauma and make different choices, and it does shift their behavior. They also use a lot of it. There's a lot of pain therapy with VR, where you're in pain, you have chronic pain, or you're like you're bed bound and you've got pain, and they find that VR, the distraction of the VR, can actually lessen the pain that the patient feels. Now, it's all new. It's all brand new. It's all really interesting. Ultimately comes down to some of the questions that you're asking. You know, but it's interesting that there is a medium that actually allows us to even ask those questions. But I always like to say, you know, the original AR is literature and the original AI is a baby. You know, these are dynamics in our life that we've had for a very long time, you know, I think part of what's important here too is in a digitized culture where, you know, so much of our lives are through, you know, this terrible design of like a box that we put in our pockets, and we're always doing this, and our spines are moving because we're doing this all the time. To have a medium that allows us to stand up again is really important. So it's also context as well, like the importance of this technology is in the context of that design having had taken over in the world. So it's complicated and interesting thing to consider.
I don't know. Okay.
Yeah.
About storytelling, could you give us like a couple of examples that you believe that were like incredible, or that you really love, or you treasure the experience of seeing it in VR? Like
In VR.
Yeah.
Well, certainly I still can't shake watching the party, the date rape piece, because that showed me something that I had no idea I didn't have, which was the language and any kind of understanding for an aggressor in that situation. It was the first time I'd ever understood how one could be confused, you know, how the gray zones of that situation. I got more of an understanding of that, and as a woman, that's profound for me. I would never thought I could see that. And I've seen that happen with the men too. Like, wow, I didn't know it felt that scary. You know, I didn't know that that's this simple thing that I was doing was really what I thought was simple was so injurious. That's definitely, and that was one of the earlier pieces. It's interestingly that some of the earlier pieces still kind of stand up. Maybe it's because it was maybe a little bit more pure, more new. But I think, you know, the evolution of verse is a piece that I can never get out of my mind. This is a piece called by Chris Milk. It's 360. You can see it on a cardboard. But it's just the beauty of it all, and it takes that train that you were talking about, the car. It's a piece about the train, the Lumiere brothers train, coming at you, and explores that terror of a train coming at you and shattering into pieces, and makes that a very poetic moment. You know, another moment that really I think I'll never forget is in one of Lynette's pieces. It was called a Wavana. And if you're ever in VR and you're walking around and there's a wall, people tend not to walk through the wall. Or if you're like walking on a tightrope, people tend not to jump off the tightrope because it's a terrifying feeling. She uses that to describe an experience of a shaman. So this first woman shaman in her tribe, this piece is about, and she's talking about how she learned that everything was alive. And so you're placed in this seat, and there's a tree trunk here, and then there's this big tree beyond the tree trunk. And the story is about her taking a kind of tea that makes her feel like her body is dissolving, and that her body is a part of the material around her. And as she's telling you that story, she moves your body through the tree trunk. So you have that terrifying feeling, but it's in the context of the shaman discovering that her body, there's nothing different between her body and the tree. And then you go into the tree and you're actually, your body's shattered and you're into pieces inside of the tree that is pieces. It's remarkable, that event. I'll never forget that.
Mira, tenemos aquí una persona. Yes.
We have a person here wanting to ask a question. Thank you.
For the conference, it was really, really good. Well, I have one question because we are telling things about virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality with entertainment. But what about learning processes? Because, for example, we have a company that developed these kind of experiences. We use the motion and also the storytelling to create these experiences with learning. What about to learn with these technologies?
You know, I'll go back to a recent example that I learned about from the medical field, and some. I learned that we mainly learn through mimesis, which is essentially copying. You know, you see like a baby sees their mother and they do the thing that the mother is doing, that type of thing. So when you have a emergency situation and there might need to be surgery, but you have to make a decision, and it's a complicated decision, and you're under stress, and doctors have to try to tell you, explain to you what is happening, the kind of surgery that needs to take place, and I need you to say yes or no so that we can rush you off. It's an almost impossible situation for the patient. But they're finding that putting the patient in VR and showing them what the surgery is allows them to understand it way faster and with much more clarity and complexity, and they are able to make those decisions faster. So this is the kind of thing that to pay attention to with this medium is the amount of information that it's able to communicate. You know, when you think about it and consider it as a communication medium, you know, what films were to photography, you know, what is VR to film? Just the amount of information that you can communicate in the same time frame, because you're also bringing the body along with it, and your ability to mimic, to understand. I guess maybe this is one big issue that I had come across in this regard.
Bueno, os tengo que dar a todos las...
Well, I would like to thank you all for being here today, and especially Shari, because she has left us as feeling virtual ourselves, and if she embodied the reality herself. Thank you very much.